Hello, my name is Chris Aukus, and I am the senior reporter at the Iowa State Daily. This is Humans of Iowa State. Today, I will be on with Steve Butler, a Morrill Professor at Iowa State University, well known for his reform of the calculus program on campus, as well as his YouTube channel, Beard Meets Calculus, with over 12,000 subscribers and hundreds of thousands of views. On campus, Steve can be seen giving autographs and selfies for his students, as well as handing out stickers with memes on them. Let's hear his story.
Humans of Iowa State 8, Mark.
As I mentioned before this, I like to have all my guests on the show introduce themselves before we begin. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Steve Butler, and when I introduce myself, I usually say I'm a teacher in math, or I teach math. Of course, that's I don't like to be very fancy. If I want to be fancy and sound serious, I say, I'm a Morrill Professor and the Barbara J. Jansen Professor of Mathematics in the Department of Mathematics at Iowa State University.
As I mentioned in my email to you and before we started filming, it just starts with one prompt. Tell me your story.
Well, since we're talking about the humans of Iowa State, I guess I should talk mostly about my story of Iowa State, of course. I might tend to go off on a few tangents. Just as a word of warning, I am a calculus teacher. Going off on tangents is part of my job. And so I came to Iowa State in 2011. And I was a postdoc, and I was looking for jobs. And I was looking around, and I interviewed at several places. And but as I like to tell people, Iowa State had that one special quality. They were willing to pay me. And so I came here. And it worked out really well because when they were hiring, they were specifically saying, we want people who can work with undergraduate students. That's what we want their focus to be. A lot of faculty, great people, but oftentimes their focus is research. And they said, we want people to really focus in on undergraduates. And so that was my job. And I think I've done okay. And so how do people know me? Well, a lot of people will think, Steve, he's the guy in charge of the math department. No, I'm not. Or they'll say, well, he's in charge of the calculus program. Not anymore. In fact, in some sense, I have very little responsibility. But what I am known for is calculus. And mostly that's because I have some videos. And this started many years ago. Back in 2016, I thought about, well, maybe I can record and post my lectures online. I went to the associate chair of our department and said, well, am I allowed to do this? Am I legally allowed to post things online? And they said, well, let me check. I'll get back to you. And it took a while. I kept saying, well, do you have any information? And finally they got back to me and they said, well, we checked with the lawyers and they said, yeah, you're allowed to, but they just want you to understand that if you post it online, other people outside of Iowa State might actually see them. I was like, oh, that's how the internet works. Oh, and but I was like, okay, great, good. I've got permission. And so technically my first video was in the last day of fall 2016. I recorded that lecture as a warm-up. Then I've just been recording lectures pretty much ever since. And I've gotten better at it, although sometimes I look back at my old lectures and say, wow, that was really good. And I sometimes think to myself that the students, I have to compete not just with other instructors, because nowadays in calculus, students have the chance to go to whichever instructor they like. I have to compete with a younger version of myself who was smarter and faster and sometimes had better jokes, but that's all right. Anyways, I started posting videos and it grew slowly at first, and then we had a new chair come in, and this happened to be in 2017, Hal Schenk, and he said, well, I really want to revamp calculus. And said, Steve, you get to do it. And knowing what I know now, I should never have agreed. It's, terrible, terrible amounts of stress. But it was great for the students. It was great for the students. And so that was when we started gearing up for coordinated calculus and the calculus that we have now. And in some sense, our model, while it might be common in some places, it's not very typical for the US. And we have a lot of things that move in unison, but also allows a lot of flexibility. So a lot of the things that happen in calculus, you can blame me for. And things like, why are there quizzes? Well, that's me. Why are there 3 exams? Well, that's my fault too, But I think generally speaking, it's worked out well. At least the number of complaints has gone down, so that's a good sign. But so as soon as things got coordinated, the viewership numbers really went off for my videos, and then the pandemic hit. Now, ironically, you might think, pandemic, everybody went online, so that must have really caused a lot of people to watch. No, it actually went down. And there's a lot of other resources, and people were rightfully stressed out by other things. But in August of 2020, my most popular video came out, which was some students had taken an old picture of me and had put it on a face mask, and it was the Steve Butler face mask. And I had learned about it, and I ordered some, and I did an unboxing video. And that got a lot of views. And it got picked up. It was very popular in India. It got millions of views in China. I was like, for a while, I was very popular on Reddit, and just for a day or two. So I had my 15 minutes of fame. And back in the day, YouTube used to do like a year in review, and I was on that. Not only was I on it, I was the thumbnail for it.
Really?
Me putting on that face mask was the thumbnail for the year in review. So during the pandemic, it was like, yep, Steve Butler wearing the face mask. That was the year. So, but yeah, and coming out of the pandemic, I handed off calculus because I worked as the coordinator for calculus. Handed it off to another great instructor in our department, Heather Bowles, wonderful person, great person, and she's worked on it for a few years, and now it's passed on to another person, and calculus still, it's evolving, it's growing, and but I'm kind of proud of my channel. It's the little engine that could. I like to point out that the athletics program has an official YouTube channel, and I have more subscribers. And I went to the provost one day. I had a meeting to talk about a different issue, and I said, I'm more popular than the athletics department is on YouTube. And he was like, really? And I know he looked into it, because within 2 days of me meeting with the provost, they actually changed the logo that went from Cyclones TV to no, we want the official Iowa State I logo. But at that point in time, I was just only 200 subscribers more. I think now I'm 1,500 subscribers more. So I continue to grow. So I've been very lucky. So of course, just because you have videos doesn't mean they're great. And I think that it's not just because I make resources available. I think students enjoy the way I teach. I try to have fun, try to be informative, and I succeed as best I can. I'm still learning. I'm still kind of young. I mean, I know there's a lot of gray in the beard here, but that's all right. I'll keep getting better. So, that's kind of my story as far as Iowa State goes.
Awesome. You ready for some questions?
You can ask as many questions as you like.
My second question for you today is, why math? Why calculus? Has it always been an inspiration for you? Has it always been the dream?
Well, okay. Well, why math? Yeah. Well, there's a story I've told a few people recently, so this, you may or may not have heard it. If you go back, way back, before I was born, and my mother was ill during her pregnancy, quite sick, and the doctors told my parents, be prepared. Your son will have mental challenges, and in particular, will probably be bad at math. And so that's what they thought when I was born. And they probably had reasons to believe that was true, given what happened in the first couple of years. On a side note, I promise I'd go off on tangents. There is something else I like to note that happened when I was born, because I know what the first movie I saw was.
Yeah.
And, what was the first movie? Star Wars. I saw Star Wars when I was 2 weeks old. And because I was born 1 week before Star Wars came out. So Star Wars had only been out for a week, and I went and saw it. Now, I don't remember it from that viewing, but I have seen it again, so I do remember it from subsequent viewings. But anyways, when I was young, I don't know if I necessarily liked math per se, but I liked puzzles. And so things that made you, puzzle books, logic puzzles that you had to think about, but also literal, like jigsaw puzzles. And I like trying to make things work, fitting things together. And but my grades weren't great. When I was in high school and I took algebra, I got C's and D's. You know, that was back then. It really clicked for me in 10th grade. And that was when I took trigonometry. And I loved it. And I think what it was it sort of like a switch in my head said, Steve, this is a puzzle. And like, you have a set of rules, and all you have to do is figure out how do you get from the rules to connect point A to point B. I'm like, well, okay, I love puzzles. And I got really good at it. And I did very well in that class, and took calculus the following year. And then quickly I transitioned to taking college courses. So even when I was still in high school, I was taking math courses. And I wasn't sure at that time what I wanted to do. I also thought maybe I might go into programming and get into computer-generated images and that type of thing. But I took a programming class, and I was bored. I didn't like it. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not doing that. But I took a math class, and I liked it. And I especially when I realized that, wait a second, here I am, I'm the high school student, and I'm keeping up with these college people. And in some cases, I was beating them. Oh, that felt good. And so I kept doing it. And my freshman year, I was like, I'm taking as much math as I can. So that's all I took. Then my sophomore year, it's like, well, I ran out of undergraduate math classes. Okay, just graduate math classes all year. And I quickly ran out of those classes as well. So it's like, well, I get a second major. So I have another degree in economics. So it's not just math. Econ. Went into the family business. My dad's a professor in economics. And but as an undergraduate, in addition to just taking a lot of math, because you can take math, but that doesn't mean you're good at communicating math. And so I found a job. We had something called a math lab, math help room. And I just loved going there. And I would go and get paid to answer questions for people. And it's like, it was a chance for me to solve problems, but then I could also try to say, okay, let me explain it to you. And so I learned, okay, what were people thinking? What were the mistakes? And then how could I explain it to them, just sort of help steer them? Oftentimes, when people think that they're bad at math, I don't think they really understand what they're bad at. They just sort of think like, well, I got the wrong answer. I'm bad at calculus. And then I look at their work and say, well, no, your calculus is great. You're just bad at adding numbers. Or, sometimes you might oh, you're bad at copying. This happens a lot when there might be a problem that involves an S and the number 5, and students can't read their own handwriting. And so I would explain things and say, okay, let's build up our intuition, because oftentimes we think of math as being complicated because it's presented that way. But when you sort of step back and say, it's a lot simpler than it looks. And there's some basic underlying principles. Now, of course, we have to build structure on them, and that obfuscates the beauty of math. But math is really a beautiful subject. And I love that job in the math help room. And I would go, even when I wasn't being paid, I'd go and work. And really big tangent, that's where I met my wife. And so, hey, math might help lead to romance. You never know. Maybe. So, I think in many respects, it's the thousands of hours I spent working in that help room that sort of made me the teacher I am. But I've also been very fortunate to have some very good teachers. From my undergraduate days, I had Jim Cannon, who's very good in topology, very great person. Wayne Barrett was another person I really enjoyed working with. He was my master's degree advisor. I finished my undergrad and applied to graduate school and did not get in anywhere. Yeah, well, it's tough. In retrospect, I understand it. It's like, well, yeah, sure, I take a lot of classes, but math is more than just taking classes. And I didn't realize it then. I've learned better since. But I applied again in 2 years after my master's, and I got into 2 places, Wisconsin and Madison, and then in California in San Diego. And then I tell people, well, these are the 2. They're like, oh, you're going to San Diego? Well, they were right. Yeah, and it's definitely climate-wise a lot better, but it's also a great fit. And so I did my PhD there, and that's where I met 2 of my most important mentors, my PhD advisor, Fan Chung, and her husband, Ron Graham. And in a lot of sense, a lot of my mannerisms, my speech styles, and the way I talk and tell stories, I picked up from Ron. And he'd have certain mannerisms, like even just the way he would say maybe. He wouldn't say, well, maybe. He said, well, maybe. He'd lean in and make the second one very dramatic. You're like, whoa, that's amazing. Really pulled you in. So that's my math story, and why I teach math. I mean, I just, math is something I'm good at, but I don't think that's enough in some sense. It's not enough to be good at something to make it your job. You should enjoy it, and I enjoy it, and I enjoy helping people. I feel like it's something useful I can do, and one of my co-authors, I've worked with over 100 people by now in mathematical research, and that's a whole different topic. I do all sorts of things in my mathematical research. But one of my co-authors was Warwick Delaney. I only met him once. He had terminal brain cancer when I met him. And I remember during our conversation, he brought up that for the majority of mathematicians, the most important thing that they'll do won't be any theorem that they prove, but it'll be what you do in the classroom as a teacher. And I believe that. And, in 100 years from now, it's unlikely that anyone's going to look back and say, oh, wow, that Steve Butler, he proved this really important math idea that changed the world. No. But I helped a lot of students, and they're going to help more students, and I feel like this is my way to help leave the world a better place.
My next question I have for you is actually pretty simple. What inspires you? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
What motivates you?
Well, what motivates me? Well, I think what drives me is the students. And so, yeah, this will be an interesting answer.
Can't wait.
But, okay, well, what gets me out of bed and keeps me moving is the students. If I didn't work with the students, I probably would leave. There's not really much reason for me to be here. I'm married, I mentioned that, and I've been married now for 20 years almost.
Congratulations.
And my wife has set foot in the state of Iowa for a grand total of 5 days in her life.
Wow.
And so she lives in California and works there. Very successful, wonderful job, and I get to see her as much as I can. But there's very strong reasons for me not to be here. And there's a lot of things that I could do. And it turns out, I have heard rumors that there are places besides Iowa State where people need to learn calculus. And so I could go other places. Now, I like what we have here at Iowa State. And I think that this is a good place. And I see the potential. And of course, I also see the other side. I see the challenges. And I know that we have opportunities here. And so what gets me out of the bed in the morning, what keeps me working, is trying to help students. And so I like to think about, okay, how can I improve the way I teach? Here's this idea I've taught. Can I do it in a different way? Here are these, I'm teaching a subject. Can I come up with a problem? A new problem that I've never quite done before, but it would be really fun and really illustrative. And of course, a lot of people think, oh, Steve, he's this big, friendly guy. Well, I'm definitely big, and I tend to be friendly. But then they take my exams, and they're like, I don't understand. Who is this person? Because my exams, they're totally different. They're not so friendly. They're challenging. They're tough. And so people wonder, wait, what? How? But I kind of like to say, they're tough in the moment, but then you see it, and you're like, oh, wow, it wasn't that bad. And there's beautiful ideas. And I like to challenge students. I do believe that you do need to be challenged. You have to have some stress. Not too much stress. Too much stress is bad, but you have to have some. And so sometimes I feel like I'm trying. Recently, we've been having conversations in the math department. What is it we need to be doing? And why do we insist that students take math? It's like, well, the engineering department insists on it, but why? What are they getting out of it? And so for me, I think about this, and I'm not unique in my perspective, so I don't want to say like, oh, I'm like groundbreaking, but I think we tend to agree that math is more than just like turning you into a calculator. That's not our goal. Math is very much a human activity. It needs people, and it needs people who can solve problems. And of course, one of the challenges that we have is convincing people that they need to go through math, because they say, well, I could just plug it into a computer. And nowadays with AI, they say, look, the AI, it gets like 100% on all these. Why do I need to learn it? Well, what we have to tell people is, look, the AI can answer these very simple questions. And they can answer these simple questions because there's a lot of data for them to train on. When you go into the world, you're not going to be faced with simple questions. You're going to be faced with challenging, complex questions, the kind of questions that haven't been even thought of before. And And then the tools, AI, it doesn't know what to do. You need to learn how to think. And so that's what we need to teach, is math needs to teach people how to think and how to learn. And coming out of the pandemic, I do think that math plays an important role. Like, okay, how can we help students learn how to learn? And that's something. So recently, I've been trying to do things where I'll put a quote in for the day, a quote for the day, or a thought for the day. So at the start of every lecture, I'll throw up a quote and just say, well, here's a thought, and here's why I wanted to share it. And hopefully it helps people. And some are cute, some are fun. One of the ones I do, I've done this for a while, is I talk about rubber duck debugging. And which is, if you're a coder and you're writing computer code, well, what if you get stuck? How can you get unstuck? And one of the things you can do is you can try to explain it. And so what a programmer might do is they'll have a little rubber duck at their computer desk, and they'll start talking to the duck. Well, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm doing this step and doing that step. I'm passing in to accomplish this. And the process of talking through it, that helps them say, oh, I see my mistake. I know how to fix it. And then they can get it to work. Because it's very frustrating when things don't work and you think that they should. It's even more frustrating when things actually do work and you think that they shouldn't, but that's a different story. So anyways, I talk about rubber duck debugging, and then I bring in rubber ducks for all the students. And so I brought in hundreds of rubber ducks at the beginning of the semester and said, all right, we're talking about the idea, and take a rubber duck with you. And so now all these students have their rubber ducks out there.
My second to last question I have for you is, do you feel welcome at Iowa State?
Do I feel welcome? Well, of course. A lot of people will come up to me and say, you're kind of like a celebrity here. And I've had a lot of people say, can I get a selfie with you? And yeah, I'm fine. I don't mind talking to people. And I'm happy to talk to people. One of the funnest things that happened recently was I was at a graduation ceremony. And I tend to go. I'm the math department representative, and mostly because, well, I don't have anything better to do on a Saturday afternoon. But it also, I look very fancy because I have all these titles attached to my name. Oh, he's a Morrill Professor. Oh, he's an endowed professor. Oh, no. And we go through, and there's ceremonies, everybody says their things, students walk across the stage. And then we walk out. And as we're walking out, some of the engineering students start chanting, Steve, Steve, Steve. And I'm like, oh, that feels so good. I mean, it feels great.
Yeah.
And am I addicted to it? Maybe, but I don't think it's a bad thing to try to be such a positive influence that you have an impact on students. So yeah, in many respects, I do feel welcomed by the students. I have had some interactions with people, not students, but with people that have left a sour taste in my mouth. We've had to get the university lawyers involved. We've had to get HR involved, and because people can get very passionate. In particular, a lot of this ties back to calculus. And you might think, well, why would people get so riled up about calculus? And but they did, and it was very stressful just because there was a lot of work to be done. But it was also very stressful because a lot of the people in my department pushed against it, and in very unprofessional ways. And it caused a lot of undue stress, which is why I said earlier, knowing what I know now, I would never do it again. And I would give that advice to anybody. It's like, oh, should you do this coordinated type course? If you care about the students, yes. If you care about your own mental health, no, run away now. It's not worth it. And so I have had a pull. And so from the students, lots of love and respect. And I think it's mutual. I love the students, I respect the students. I think it goes that from the students to me as well. From some of my colleagues, not all, some of my colleagues, there have been days where I say, is it really worth it for me to stay at Iowa State? But, at the end of the day, I still come back. And, so I would say, do I feel welcome? No, I'm much more ambivalent than when I started answering this question. I would say, on a whole, yes. But it doesn't come without challenges.
What role has social media played in your interactions and relationships with your students?
Well, so when it comes to social media, I don't use very much other than YouTube and Reddit. Like I never have had any thing like TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, and I don't know, there's probably like 100 others that I'm missing. But I do think I was, outed in some sense on Reddit a long time ago. Like, all right, fine, I'll just lean into it. And so I monitor and what students say, and because they feel very passionate about calculus. And I feel like I have to step in and say, I have to defend calculus's honor. And because I understand. Calculus is a very challenging course, and a lot of students were like, well, is there a better way? Is there something that I could somehow make it easier on myself? Maybe I'll take it at another school. Maybe I'll do this, I'll do that. And then I have to say, but you could do that, and I'm perfectly fine with you doing that if you learn it. But if you're trying to get through it without learning it, it's not going to be useful. And we do a good job at Iowa State. I would say that given the resources we have, we do an incredible job. If we had better resources, we could do better. But we really put a lot of thought and energy into how we teach and how we assess. And I do think that we have one of the best calculus programs at Iowa State. So that's me defending calculus on social media. And I think back like 6-7 years ago, there were a lot more memes than there used to be. So it was fun to see the Steve Butler memes. I have one taped to my door. And there was another student once made a song about, Steve Butler is coming to town. And there's all sorts of fun things that students do. I think students are very creative, and I enjoy it. I don't know if I use social media as much as I could or I should. I feel like I've gone into this weird situation now where because I am so known for a certain thing, I have to be careful not to trivialize it or be careful what I say and what I do. There's like Steve Butler, the person who goes home, watches Korean dramas, some Japanese anime, and all sorts of stuff. And there's like, well, Steve Butler, the character, beard meets calculus. And so it's almost like there's a persona of Steve Butler now, and I have to keep that persona up. But thankfully, we're very similar, and we get along well, so it's not hard to do that. From time to time, I've even had emails saying, oh, here's this product we'd like to have you feature on your YouTube channel. And I'm just like, there's this chainsaw? You want me to talk about how this chainsaw is great with solving calculus problems? And so I've never done anything like that, and I never will. I've never taken any sponsors. People might wonder, like, how much money do you make off of YouTube? The answer is zero. I am not monetized. I make no money off of YouTube. And you might say, well, what about the ads? Well, that all goes to YouTube. I hate ads. I abhor ads. And which is why I actually spend a non-trivial amount of money. Every video I post on YouTube, and then a separate site called Vimeo. Vimeo hosts things. You pay Vimeo to host, but then it's ad-free, better quality. And I put links to both. Of course, people always go to YouTube because it's become a social media platform. But I'm just like, look, if you don't want ads, go there. Now, if you have an ad blocker or whatever, and YouTube works for you, great, do that. But I want you. I'm not out here to make money off of this. When you become a mathematician, I like to joke, you take a vow of poverty, and it's not true. I know a lot of mathematicians who are very well off. My PhD advisor was a mathematician who worked in industry for years, and for a while, when she went back into academia, she was cautious to let students come to her house because it would give them the wrong idea of like, oh, wow, my advisor, look at her house, it's so beautiful. I could make this as a mathematician? No, you can't. Yeah, if I wanted to make money, I wouldn't be working in academia. I want to help people learn. That's my goal.
All right. My last question I have for you today is, did we forget anything? Is there anything else you would like our readers and viewers to know about you? Is there anything else you have for me?
I'm sure there's a lot, but I can't remember any of it. Come to class. That's the advice I have for the students. Come to class. And I know there's videos, and I know that they work, but I really wish students would come to class. And I would like the students to be engaged more. If I was making a wish list, ask questions during lecture, respond, and it's okay to say I don't know. There's a lot that we don't know. The greatest obstacle to knowledge or to progress isn't a lack of knowledge. It's the illusion of knowledge. We think we know. We actually don't. And so it would be good to see students be engaged. I would like the students to know that maybe while I'm a big outlier, sometimes I'm not the only outlier. There's a lot of faculty who care and work really hard. And give them the benefit of the doubt and work with them. I like to say that I believe in the students. And I do. I think that they're good. If you watch my videos, I'll have fun and I'll joke around a lot. Last week there was a video I was recording downstairs in my basement because I record in the basement where it's nice and quiet, turn off all the fans in my house. And we had a problem about a helicopter, and I was like, oh yeah, get to the chopper, and I'll throw those things like just at random but at the end of my videos, almost always when I'm recording, I'll be like, thanks for coming. Thank you for working hard. And I know you can do this. I know you're amazing. So keep it up. I believe in you. And maybe I'll see you again.